Hey guys, today I want to tell you how I went from making just under $40,000 a year to $225,000 per year in just over 3 years. And no, it's not some overnight success story. This story really started way before that. At 15 years old, I was riding my bike 3 miles to and from Taco Bell after wrestling practice. I didn't have a car. I was making $7 an hour, and I was just a general crew member. So I was actually really good at making burritos. Like, really good. And the only problem was there was no raises. There was no promotions, and there was no future there for me. I would work until midnight or even 1 in the morning. I rode my bike home, slept a few hours, then woke up at 5:30 a.m. to run with the rest of the wrestling team. Some days I was so mentally and physically exhausted that I didn't even feel real anymore. I didn't have a plan, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really just knew one thing. I did not want that to be my forever. Growing up, my family didn't have much money, so I'd use my paychecks to buy food and small things for myself, but I always made sure my brothers and sisters ate first, because I told myself it didn't matter, because I was cutting weight for wrestling anyways. That job at Taco Bell, it taught me something very early on in my career, I guess you could say, and that's that showing up really matters. Working with people that you like matters. And even when you don't have much, you do still have responsibilities. And after high school, I had a 2-week stint at Panda Express. I didn't even know how to use the register, so they had me scrubbing the floors and the walls, and I immediately knew that that was not it.
Exactly.
When an aerospace manufacturing plant called me back after I had applied, I immediately jumped at that opportunity. So for about the next 6.5 years, I'd say, I was working as an X-ray technician and inspecting aerospace parts.
Okay.
I was working 60 hours a week, and I did that for 52 weeks a year. I did not have days off. And that job, it really taught me discipline. It taught me how to grind without having motivation. You know, it taught me about something even harder, though. And that's that hard work doesn't really matter if you're working somewhere that doesn't respect it. And that was a jaw-dropping realization that I had, that, you know, I can bust my rear end day in and day out, and they're still going to treat me the same. I am just an infinitesimal speck in this corporation. And that's fine. That's fine. You know, you can give everything you have and still be invisible. During that time, I also went through a pretty bad breakup. I was depressed and I didn't deal with it the right way. I partied and I avoided all of my childhood stuff that I cover in other videos. And I numbed things out. You know, I don't do that anymore. But that took a lot of self-reflection and having uncomfortable conversations that I never wanted to have. And, you know, big shout out to my fiance, because she has helped push me in the right direction when it comes to a lot of these things. And I don't know how I'll ever repay her for that. But so in 2021, That's when I met my now fiance. I was still working at that aerospace place, and by 2022, I was still working hard, but I felt stuck, and I felt trapped. I felt like I was wasting away, and that I would never amount to anything, and feeling extremely, extremely depressed. Like no matter what I did, I wasn't moving forward. You know, like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'd always end up in the same place. And my fiance, she really saw something in me before I did. She would always tell me that I'm on the right path, and I had no idea what she was talking about. Just complete transparency. She would be like, I think you're doing the right things, and you're working hard, and good things will come. And I was just like, no, they won't. They won't. I'm going to be working here until I'm old and rotting like everybody else that works here.
You want to quit, but you can't. You worked at this plant so long. You're a plant.
At least that's how I felt. So, based on what she thought about me, it didn't teach me, it lit a fire under my ass, right? And that's when I kind of started my first business. I did pressure washing. I was pressure washing sidewalks and driveways, and I was charging only $50 a job because the way I thought about it, if I finished in an hour, I just almost tripled my income that I had from the aerospace place. But pretty quickly, I'd say I realized something again, that I did not want that to be my forever. Working with chemicals like SH and coming home wet, and it was just gnarly, dude. Covered in moss, and the job was gross. I know some people work some like filthy jobs, right? I've worked filthy jobs, but I just did not like being damp all day. It was horrible. Then, kind of everything shifted. My fiance told me about a network engineering boot camp that people in her family went through. And I'd always liked computers, and I built PCs with my dad growing up and continued to build PCs. I still build PCs, It's just a hobby that I've always had. I like building things. So I didn't really know what working in tech meant. I just knew that chances are it pays better than what I was currently making. So when I started that boot camp, I had no idea what I was doing. I just paid this people I've never met $60K that I didn't have to hopefully level up, and I couldn't tell a switch from a router, from a firewall, from a frickin' router at your house, right? They all look the same to me. And so kind of at that same time, when I started the training, I also applied to the IBEW kind of as a backup plan, just in case this training didn't work out, or, I bombed or something like that. But I took the IBEW test and I passed, but I didn't rank high enough to get called right away, which is kind of what I was looking for. I was looking for something to get me the heck out of where I was at. So while I waited, I just dove headfirst and fully committed to that boot camp. It took me about 6 months to complete it, start to finish. And they really taught me the fundamentals. of networking and what I need to know. And they help me build a resume and they help me interview, kind of, right? They would just like have us record audio and then they would review the audio and provide us feedback, right? They weren't in there on the interview with me being like, no, say this, say that. It was like, hey, here's where you messed up. You did not sound confident here. Sounds like you're reading from a script, etc. Right? So during the training, I actually bounced between different jobs to make the schedule work for the training. So I quit aerospace to do some explosive works. So I worked for a rock drilling company where we worked with companies like Knife River, who do the quarries and stuff. And we would blow up their quarries for them so they had rock to make gravel and stuff like that. And I'm talking like old school, like there's a drill hole, you fill it up with emulsion and send an Austin powder cap down there, and then some guy screams, "Fire in the hole!" Right? Like that. That type of explosives, like some stuff you'd see on a cartoon. But after that, I quit that job to work with a metal manufacturing company where I was working with super dangerous and caustic chemicals like pure chloride and sodium chloride. And where I live, it rains a lot. And I don't know if this makes sense, right? But you have sodium chloride or chloride, right? What happens when you add water molecules to chloride? You now get hydrochloric acid. But when it gets wet and it turns into a gas like that, it's invisible and it just melts your insides. So I was fully respiratored up head to toe, and I would come home covered in that yellow chloride, right? It'd be caked on me. People at that company, they'd get cancer all the time. I am so glad I left. So I quit that. And then thankfully, the aerospace company that I worked for originally took me back. And I requested to be on like graveyard. So I had the days to like conduct interviews and job search and stuff like that. Make sure you drink your water, by the way. So I wasn't chasing comfort in this time. I wasn't looking for my end-all be-all job, right? I just was looking for a North Star, something to point me in the right direction. I was chasing that momentum, if you will, right? So eventually, after like 3 months of job search, I landed my first tech job in Los Angeles, California, right? So my income almost doubled overnight. I was making like 40K to 90. That was my job offer, was 90,000. I remember when I went to go put in my 2-week notice, my manager at the time, at the aerospace place, he was like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, we just hired you back. Why are you leaving?" And I was like, "Check it out, Brandon. Are you going to pay me $90K a year? If not, I'm going to California, bro." And he was like, "You're making a mistake and you shouldn't do that," etc. Right? It's just things that people who think they're in a position of power say to try and get you to stay to make their life easier. And it was all BS, which is fine, you know? So when I start this job, my fiance and I, we weren't even together for a year. And I just packed up and headed down to good old California, me and my lonesome. And I was staying in an Airbnb at the time. I didn't know anything about California, so when I first got there, I was staying in an Airbnb on Valencia Avenue. For those of you who are from the area, you know that that is almost on the corner of Crenshaw and Slauson. Okay, it was not a good area. I stayed there for about a month, and then I had a work event that I had to fly to, and when I came back, I was homeless because I did not want to stay inside of that Airbnb anymore. So I started looking for apartments, and I got an apartment. Luckily, it was, $2,500 for a studio per month. It was horrible, way overpriced. And not to mention, the job that I was working was very chaotic. I had no idea what I was doing half the time. And I tried my best to learn fast, right? I constantly asked questions. I took notes. I stayed late, and I tried to absorb every ounce of information that I could. And then luckily, 6 months later, I got my first big boy 6-figure job offer working for a MSP, which stands for Managed Service Provider, assigned to a FANG company. FANG, that stands for Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google. So just big tech companies, right? I'm not going to tell you which one I worked at. But that job offer was for $115,000, right? So if we're thinking about it, in less than a year, I went from $40K to $115,000. And that's really when I became obsessed with getting better. And I pushed myself every single day, and I went to bed mentally exhausted and dreamed about networking. Literally had dreams about networking. This was in 2022 that I got that job offer. So everything was going well and splendid, and I was doing very good. And then guess what happens? All of a sudden, what do they hit me with? They chose a different MSP. You don't have a job by the end of April. Huh. How am I supposed to feel about that? Okay. I just moved to LA. It's so expensive with all the payments that I'm making towards this training company and the rent and everything else that I started freaking out. I started having a panic attack. I was like, dude, okay, I guess I'm just going to go back to the aerospace company if they'll keep me. And it was terrifying. But what I did is I doubled down. I said, F that. And I doubled down. I started my own consulting company, and I landed a contract that paid me $100 an hour, and I became the sole point of contact for a major medical company in the Bay Area, and I handled, they're a global company, but I handled their Bay Area offices as well as their data center. And again, what did I do? I tried my best to take the experiences that I had from the previous two jobs and apply them to this one. And what do you know? Nothing was the same, right? And I definitely didn't pretend to know everything. I asked questions. Mainly to people that I had worked with previously, because you don't want to ask super simple questions to people that you work with, because they're going to be like, this dude is incompetent. Why do we hire him? I researched and I stayed humble, right? And luckily, a few months after that, the FANG role that I had, it opened back up, but with a different managed service provider. And they reached out to me and said, "Hey, are you interested in coming back?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'd do it." When the salary negotiations came up after my interview with them, I told them that I was making $150,000, not 115. This is where the negotiation comes in, right? It doesn't hurt to fib. They had no possible idea what I was making previously, right? So I gave myself a 40K increase. I was like, yeah, I made 150. If you guys can match that, I have no problem coming back. They offered me 155. So I got fired at 115. I didn't get fired. We lost the contract. I was making 115. And 3 months later, I was making 155 doing the exact same thing, right? While working my contract role, paying me $100 an hour. It was like 14 grand a month or something like that. The most I ever made with that company and working a job simultaneously was 40 grand net. Or sorry, 40 grand gross. That's the most I ever made in a month. And I'm nowhere near close to that, and I don't think I want to be, honestly. It was so stressful that I don't even think that, was it worth it? Yes. Right? But I had such bad anxiety that I couldn't even go outside or look up at the stars because I started to remember that I was just on a floating rock in the middle of forever nothingness, which makes no sense, right? So that year, 2023 into 2024 was absolutely brutal. I worked constantly, I was stressed, and I was exhausted, but I was growing. Some months, like I said, I cleared $40,000. It only happened once, but yeah. And eventually, after, working myself into a ash of man, if you will, my fiance and I decided that we kind of wanted to go back home. So I transitioned roles and I ended my contract, 2-week notice, of course. And I just kept chugging, kept going. When I tried to take the next step in my career with the FANG company that I was working at, a technical project management role had opened up, and I was like, hey, I'd be interested in doing that. I'm seriously considering it. And my manager straight up told me, he said, you are too valuable to the team, and we cannot lose you there, so you will not be considered. Which I understood, but that's something you never want to hear, especially when you want to continue to push yourself. So I started looking elsewhere. That was the end of 2024. No. That was in this year, 2025. After a few interviews, right, I landed a full-time role after a very, very, very strenuous interview process. I landed a full-time role with one of, if not the biggest tech companies in the world. And by 2025, where I'm at now, I currently make $225,000 a year. And really, here's the point of this entire video, right? Any role you go into, you are not going to know everything. You may not even be confident. You may not even have the skills, right? But as long as you push yourself and you don't take no for an answer, within your own being, and you just say, screw it, I'm going to figure it out. I'm either going to succeed or I'm going to die. I'm not going to drown anymore. That's when it starts to pay off. Like, I started tired, I started broke as shit, and I started unsure. But I kept going. It's like investing, right? You don't get compound interest until you're in the market for like 20 years or after you hit your first $100,000. It's very similar to that in corporate and your professional lives. If you quit, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not even going to get the chance to grow. So like, just push yourself because you deserve it. You can do it. You will do it. But you have to believe that you can. Right? That is the root cause. Push yourself. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video interesting, informational. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave a comment where you're at now in terms of salary, if you feel comfortable disclosing that, and where you want to be within the next 5-10 years. Let me know. I'm interested. And if you guys would like videos on how I actually negotiate contracts and my thought process when it comes to interviewing for these type of roles and just overall financial health and well-being and life perspective type stuff, let me know. Let me know what kind of videos you may be interested in. If you found this video informational or interesting, let me know. I hope you all have a great day. This is Root Cause, and remember, you deserve it.